All right, opening day is this week. The wait is finally coming to an end, and I'm excited to talk baseball with my pal Emily Jones. And Emily, first, before we get into baseball, Do It for Dirt always does some awesome things. It's like a 365 day out of the year operation, and recently there's been an apparel line, or maybe just one item that I guess is available for purchase with proceeds going towards Do It for Dirt, the Consistent Cray 2020 shirts, I believe.
Yeah. So this is a crazy time for everyone. I think we're all a little bit crazy in a sense, but recently I went on kind of like a Instagram stories rant about how I just need people to be consistent with their cray because there's a lot of inconsistent cray out there. So it kind of became like a little mantra that people latched onto. And so I teamed up with a company called Custom Ink, and they specialize in fundraising and, just created these Consistent Cray 2020 t-shirts, and all the proceeds are benefiting the Do It for Dirt Foundation. Obviously, as you know, running a nonprofit yourself, these are hard times. It's hard for nonprofits to generate funds because we're so used to, a big fundraiser once a year or a golf tournament here and there, and so our golf tournament has been postponed now twice. Our big event that we have every year has been, canceled or at least postponed indefinitely. So we're just trying to find ways to generate revenue so we can continue to help families impacted by sudden loss.
It's all over social media. Emily's Twitter, Anthony Andro, who has a role in Do It for Dirt, he's tweeted about it. It's on my Twitter. It's pretty easy to find. So if you want to add to your t-shirt line and help out Do It for Dirt in the process, pretty easy to do. All right, Emily, yesterday you went out to Globe Life Field, your first time since prior to spring training. I'm just curious, what are some of your initial impressions?
I mean, I'm blown away at how beautiful it is. I mean, it's so pristine. It's so new. It's so pretty. I know it gets knocked from the outside. I'm kind of one of those where I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the outside. It's like, there's not too many stadiums that I look at and I'm like, oh, look at this work of art. It's just beautiful. For me, it's all about what's on the inside. And so, this ballpark is, they thought of everything. And I haven't even gotten to get down on the clubhouse level, and from the stories that I've heard from the players, it's amazing. And, I think it's a first class facility. I don't think, I can see where people would make those, comparisons to Minute Maid just because it's another retractable roof, but I don't really see it, honestly. And when I sit up in the press box where we are at press level, when I look out, it reminds me a lot of the old ballpark, just in like kind of just the view of the field. Now, when you look out beyond it, there's obviously there's some big differences. The first of which is the fact that it's enclosed, thank God. And but I think it's gorgeous. I will say, and I think you could probably speak to this too. I was watching that home run derby they had on Sunday, and trying to track balls is difficult when that roof is closed. And I haven't seen it when it's been open, but there are balls that I thought for sure were out that landed in like shallow right. And I was like, oh dear. So thank goodness I'm not doing play-by-play. But anyway, it does take a little bit to get used to because we're up at a higher level to try to track those with the combination of the roof being closed.
I'm curious with this new field, and there are all these really cool elements, and I think it's interesting you mentioned that it still reminds you of the old ballpark. Is there something from a fan standpoint that you think they're going to be drawn to? Because when I think of the old ballpark, like fans loved Greens Hill. They love the porch in right field to see, where can Joey Gallo hit his next home run? Is there a part of the park that you're like, man, fans are going to fall in love with this?
I think it's that little section. I can't, and forgive me for not knowing exactly, like left center, where that section of seats like juts out. And it's kind of like its own little area. And so I'm interested to see if they're going to market that, or if organically there will be a name formed for that. I just think that that's kind of little section is kind of cool. You're kind of in this own little spot by yourself, kind of out, a little bit over the action. And so, that to me, what might be something that's unique about it, that maybe will, that section will come up with a name and become, a hot ticket.
All right, Emily, the 60-game season has a lot of interesting layers just at a league level and then team level. Is there something that stands out to you that you're maybe most excited about, just seeing how it unfolds, or, whether it's, again, a league thing or maybe something Rangers specific?
I mean, I just think the whole novelty of this entire season is going to make it, must watch and must follow, because we've never seen anything like this. I mean, especially in a sport like this, that's so, bound in tradition and numbers and stats and all of that, over the course of a 162 game season, and the whole marathon, not a sprint. And now it's exactly the opposite. I'm curious to see, if a player goes on, I mean, think about it. If Josh Hamilton were to play, 2010-11, Josh Hamilton were to played a 60 game season, and you take those months where he had in like May and June, it would have hit like 600, like it was, insane.
Yeah.
And so I think those anomalies are going to be so fun to watch, to where if a guy does get on a roll, where people really start paying attention to see how gaudy those numbers can get. Same way with the home runs or average or whatever it is. But I think more than anything, I'm curious to see how the depth of this Rangers rotation is going to play in the 60 game season. Because of course it would have benefited them in a 162 game season tremendously. But I think if you can lean so heavily on those guys and establish that 5-man rotation of consistency, which this group has, and you always account for, injuries and guys missing starts and all that kind of stuff. But I think with a shorter sample, there's less likelihood of that. There's more likelihood that you could have the same 5 guys in a rotation from start to finish. So I'm super curious to see how that plays out. And, it's just not very often, in fact, never, that you say, I mean, the strength of this Rangers team is the starting rotation. And by the way, it could be the deepest and top to bottom best in the league.
So I think, one of the guys who I think could be a big part of this, and you mentioned like the Josh Hamilton small sample, one guy who has had stretches of like a month, maybe 2 months, where he's arguably been the best offensive player at his position in the league, is Rougie Opening. It's what surrounds those months that sometimes leaves something to be desired. But he had finished last year really strong. I don't know what to make of spring training results. I don't know what to make of summer training, whatever we're calling this, results. But I know that it's better that he's doing well than if he was 0 for the month of July. But it does seem like there's some tangible differences and maybe things that we can't see, the intangible stuff, between the ears. I'm just curious, him better than any of us. What are the things that jump out to you about Rougie? Because I think, in addition to Joey, if you're looking for someone to help this lineup, I think Rougie is absolutely capable in a 60-game stretch of having a really big impact.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I love what we've heard from him and the way that he's talking about things. Because I think that previously in his career, there was a tendency to kind of keep his head down, just got to keep working, and not acknowledge so much. I mean, he wasn't ever in denial, but to be able to express the mental frustration. And so he's done that with me over the course of time, to where, he'll kind of let that guard down a little bit. But there's only so much that friends, family, whatever I am to Rougie can do. And I think once you open yourself up to that vulnerability with your teammates and your coaches, then things can really turn around. And I think that's what he finally started to do. He wasn't so afraid to talk about it. He wasn't so afraid to deal with it. And so I think the mental aspect of what he's, development that he's made over the last year or so is way bigger than any physical adjustment that he's made, or tweaks to his swing or mechanics or anything like that. But once you can free your mind, especially in this game, it can get so cluttered, then you really can't open yourself up to physically reach your potential. And I think he knows the potential that he has. When the shutdown happened, he did not stop. I mean, he made sure that he stayed on top of it. And, not saying that anybody else did, but I'm just saying, I know for a fact that he was adamant about, continuing to progress and to make those adjustments to his swing. And, now you see it, granted it's just, Ranger on Ranger, but it's like, he's waiting for things. He's got his timing down and he's not rushing. And so now he's not having to swing so hard. He's not having to force the issue. He's able to, maximize the tools that he has and not do it in such a, an aggressive manner to where he's like, he's pressing too hard, and that's both physical and mental.
Anything else that's jumped at him? We've had now a couple of weeks of conversations with guys, and I'm sure you've talked to guys beyond just these Zoom conversations we've had. Anything else just jump out, whether it's like a shared sentiment, getting ready for the season, or a particular thing that someone said that stood out to you in any of the interactions that we've had leading up to where we are right now?
I think not really anything in particular. Honestly, I'm shocked we're here. I really am. Yeah. I mean, if you would have told me a month ago that we were going to make it through, summer camp or whatever, and make it to opening day with this few positive tests, I would have told you were crazy. So I commend the players for taking it seriously and for, limiting their exposure outside the ballpark. And as a byproduct of that, their families doing the same thing. And so that's been the thing that surprised me most. I did not believe we would make it here because the NBA is a bubble, right? Like there's the room for error there is a lot smaller than it is in this situation. Now what happens when all these teams start to travel and all that kind of stuff? Hopefully they'll stay low. I don't know that they will, but I feel like, for us to be in this position right now to have, legitimate baseball played this week, has been, to me, the biggest storyline thus far.
All right, Emily, I'm curious as far as Elvis. We talked about one middle infielder, now another. You've known Elvis for at this point, probably almost half his life, maybe just under that. It's crazy. And last year he even admitted like he's got to be better. And I think the last time he faced adversity like this was after the 2015 postseason series against Toronto, and he came back and put together the best 2 years of his career. And I'm just curious, like, what are you expecting out of Elvis? What's realistic? What's fair? Because this guy is so talented and I think has the ability to make a big impact, but obviously last year was not the type of season that he or anyone was necessarily looking for out of him.
It wasn't. And I think, honestly, Elvis struggled in that first year after Adrian. I think that he leaned on him so heavily. And I think that the departure of Adrian automatically like shifted the focus to Elvis as that, next guy. And you can't do that. It just doesn't happen that way. We saw it after Michael left. It's that role. You're not always going to have the guy in the clubhouse, one guy. And I don't think Elvis, wants to be that or needs to be that. But I think he did feel a certain amount of, pressure to be, more accountable, more serious, and, all that, more of a vocal leader. And I think for a player like him and a person like him who's so fun loving, who's so, his whole role, his entire career has been to keep things light and to keep things chill. And so I think that there was some things that weighed on him throughout last season, with a young team, a new manager, all those things that go into it, that can cloud your mind when you go out onto the field. And as much as you want to be able to separate those two, they're human beings, and it's a difficult thing to do. So I feel like with the strides that he made, as involved as he was with the Players Association and the negotiation regarding getting back to baseball, I feel like all those, and Elvis is, obviously he's matured, in his time in the big leagues, but I think this offseason was a big one for him in the, maturity aspect and the leadership aspect. And I don't think that you'll see him be the guy like Adrian was or like Michael was. And I don't think he wants that, but I think that you're going to see him be more comfortable in kind of sharing that role, with guys like Shin Soo Choo, with Lance Lynn, with Mike Minor, and Robinson Chirinos. And so I think that there was a little bit of him that felt like he was torn in a few different directions, and he wasn't able to, to put everything that he needed, or to rid his mind of those things enough to just play baseball. And I think and hope that that's what he'll be able to do. And also he's extra motivated. It's just like he was, like you said, after 15 in Toronto. I mean, and the thing about Elvis is he's a pretty self-aware guy. He's very self-aware, actually. I mean, he's not trying to run from anything. He's not trying to hide from anything. He knows last year was a disappointment. And I think he's eager to prove that, he's got plenty of years left in him.
The self-aware part to me has really stood out over the last few years. I just think that that's such an important part for anyone professionally. And if you're not self-aware, I guess if you're just super talented, that delusional mindset works.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think that's huge. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I never knew him until 2015 in any capacity other than just as a fan. And you see the smiling, happy, fun guy that probably enjoyed being young and Elvis and whatnot. But I actually if I were to think back on my 6 years or whatever, his maturity really does jump out and growth in that way. And I mean, I don't know why I should have expected otherwise. And I don't know that I didn't expect that, but I think the maturity and the self-awareness really is something that I think is really, I don't want to say unique, but really cool to witness. And you've been able to witness that firsthand because you've witnessed the entire evolution. I kind of jumped in the middle, but it makes him really easy to root for, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think a lot of that comes with becoming a husband and becoming a parent. And, he's grown up, and it's also difficult sometimes for that to happen all within one organization, right? Because if you're already established as a player and you go into a new clubhouse, you're there for a year or two, you know what I mean? You already have this reputation, and it seems like, even though so many basically the entire cast around him has changed since he got here. I mean, he's, I think the only guy left from that far back. And so, it's a little bit more difficult to do within, when you spend your entire career with one organization, to kind of change that, young, fun-loving player, especially when you've been surrounded by, you've had two very dominant leaders during the course of your career in Michael and in Adrian. And so trying to find that footing and to evolve as a leader is a little bit of a more daunting process. I mean, for Michael, not that it was easy for Michael, but that was a young team just dying for someone to step up. And fortunately he did. And then same way with Adrian, it wasn't automatic when Michael left, because I remember we kind of looked at Ian, and Ian was like, I'm outsy on that. And so then it kind of, it just kind of evolved. So, I'm, obviously hoping good things for him. And I think he's put in the work. I know he's serious about redeeming himself after a disappointing 2019. So, here's hoping he can get off to a hot start too.
All right, two more questions for you. One serious, one not so serious. This year is great, and the neat thing about a 60-game season is, well, the Rangers automatically are in contention 2 months with 2 months left, and probably will I think they're in a position to really compete for a playoff spot. But I think we'd all agree that the best years are still probably beyond this season. Just curious if you've even had time to think about or had conversations just about where the organization is still building towards a brighter future. It's one of the things that stresses me out is no minor league season just stinks, and it impacts everyone, but I do think it impacts some organizations more than others. And with all the really young talent that this organization has, I know this was supposed to be a big year for the growth of a lot of those young guys, but they're still there. And they're still super talented. And I just don't know, have you had any time to think about the future, or conversations with people about kind of where the organization is in terms of being on track to compete in whenever it is they feel like their best opportunity to strike is?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're right. It does affect some organizations more than others, and I feel like it does affect this one, probably more so than than a lot of others. But I also too trust this front office to be forward thinking, to be innovative, to try to do some things in this time where there is no technical season, to keep guys on track and to to continue to develop those guys. The evaluation process, in my opinion, is going to be the most difficult thing when we get hopefully back to normal next spring training. How you evaluate those guys, because you're used to having a legitimate period of time of playing actual games to judge these guys on and to try to figure out where they are. But I think people will get creative. I think those guys in the minor leagues are fighting for their careers at this point too. So, it sounds terrible, but, and I don't want to come off the wrong way, but this time period could weed a lot of people out. Like it's, you know what I mean? Where if you don't have the intestinal fortitude to weather this storm, and not to say that means you wouldn't make it in the big leagues, but it's also kind of like another test. Like, let's see if you can get through this and make it. And then, the cream's going to rise to the top. Right. And so, I kind of feel like this process is going to, and I don't mean that harshly. I just think that you've got to really have it in you to want it even more so than you did a year ago because of the circumstances that everyone's facing.
All right. Last question for you, Em. We've done all these Zoom things. We've got CJ with his like super fancy like mic setup. You got Evan who looks like he's like playing video games with his headset. Mm-hmm. You got just the general confusion from some people about how to mute and unmute and all that. What is your most enjoyable Zoom thought from the collective group of us who gather together multiple times a day for these various Zoom conversations?
I mean, it has to be John Blake, right? Like he'll be like, all right, who's got questions? And then we'll do questions. And then it's like 2 questions in. It's like, any more questions? We'll take 2. I'm like, yes. Okay. I mean, and God love him. I mean, he's, John and his staff are having to deal with, these circumstances, and everything's more difficult. And, everybody's grumpy because, they're up in the press box and we can't, everything's, nothing's normal, but it is what it is. Right. And so, I think John's just like, and then every once in a while, like his head will pop into the shot and come out, and he's got his mask on and his eyes are all big. And it's like, I think CJ did a screenshot or something of one of them. And then there's TR who's got like the camera, like,
like right up. Yeah.
And it's like, just back it up a little bit, TR, just back it up just a little bit. So yeah, it's all, it is what it is. These are crazy times, and I'm just happy that we're going to have baseball. And I just hope we have it for as long as we can. I hope we have it. I hope we make it through. I hope they continue to prove me wrong, and that we make it through this entire run. And, we're all able to, at least have this distraction at nighttime.
Cheers to that, Em. Let's have a great season.
All right. Cheers to that. I'm going to get back to drinking my gallon of water.